Hello everybody, this is Umbral Dragon again, and I remember last time I left off trying to finish this combat chapter. A lot of things have happened since then, and so I apologize, but be that as it may, I'm going to jump right back into this and continue with how combat works in Mythras, and move on from there and try to get to this section up until about ranged. So fighting in Mythras is resolved in a blow-by-blow progression. Each attack or parry represents a single swing, cast, or shot of a weapon. Any offensive action is permitted the chance to be resisted by a reaction. Thus, even if a character manages to strike an opponent, the foe is permitted its own roll to see if it can parry blow before it lands. The same philosophy is used whether the attacks are missile weapons against targets diving for cover or trying to break free from the iron grasp of a giant octopus. That's kind of a cool picture, image idea. Attacks and parries. Close combat, yeah, we're on page 94, just so you know. Attacks and parries. Close combat is handled in the following step-by-step manner. On his or her turn, the attacker spends an action point, rolls against his combat style, and notes the result. And remember, I was mentioning that you probably should not touch the dice once you roll them, because we may have to take a look at those and take note of what dice roll actually came up, because it could be super important to know exactly what you rolled, because we may need that number for an opposed roll or other thing that may come up. So keep in mind that it does happen sometimes. People will they'll get excited and they'll pick up their dice once they roll them, and they think, okay, I rolled this or whatever, and so now we don't know. So this right here is a 60, right? So I rolled a 60. Let's say I rolled that for my combat style. Let's say my combat style was 60. That means that I would normally hit. Okay. So if desired, the defender spends an action point and rolls against his combat style and knows the result. Okay, so let's say I have somebody else fighting me and they are trying to parry. Okay, so they roll 27. Alright, there's a 27. And so now that we have that 27, we know that if this guy's combat style was about, let's say, a 35, he is successful. Alright, so the success level of the results are compared as per a differential roll. Alright, now differential roll is going to be in skills. Alright, so you have to go to that page and check that table out. But basically, you're going to, it's pretty simple. I'll just go there real quick and so this is known as spot rolls. This is equipment. Here we go. Skills. Alright, so at the beginning of skills, you have the little chart. Alright, for differential rolls. And I believe it's here in the front. Okay, so maybe it's in the very back, that very end of this thing. And it is right here on page 51 on the right hand side. Okay, so the results of the roll. They had the protagonist and the antagonist. Okay, so if you're not sure, because some of you may not be, player characters are the protagonists and the enemies are the antagonists. So my protagonist rolled a success. So protagonist success. My antagonist rolled a success. So antagonist success. We look right in the middle and it says no benefit. Okay? Any difference grants the combatant with a superior roll, one or more special effects. If the attacker achieved a success or critical, he may roll weapon damage and apply the damage modifiers. If applicable, a hit location is determined for the blow. If the defender achieved a success or critical, reduce any damage inflicted according to the comparative sizes of the weapons involved. Now remember, if I have two medium weapons, let's say a longsword and a longsword, or a longsword and a scimitar, they're both medium weapons, and so the damage reduction for the defending weapon will be all. So there's really no point in rolling damage, because a medium weapon on a successful parry will parry all of the damage. So that would be successful for the defender and not so successful for me as a player character, right? It should be noted any special effects generated by the exchange are independent of whether or not damage is inflicted. It's quite possible for a defender to gain the higher success level, yet still suffer injury. This is true. Okay. Damage reduction. If a defender succeeds in parrying, he can reduce an attacker's damage, if any, according to the comparative size of the weapons used. Parrying an attack with a weapon or shield of equal or greater size deflects all damage, right? Parrying with a weapon or shield of any size, one size less, only deflects half, and parrying with a weapon or shield two or more sizes less fails to deflect any damage, okay? Parrying a missed attack. Okay. If the attacker misses his initial attack roll, the defender has the option of whether or not to spend an action point to parry. Although it may seem disingenuous to parry an attack which will miss anyway, a skilled defender can use this to advantage to gain one or more special effects, potentially weakening or incapacitating a foe, and preserving their next turn for some other action. Okay? So let's say the defender's turn comes up, and he has a 35 for his weapon skill, and he rolls a 39. Okay? Remember I tell you, you gotta leave those dice there. You can't just pick them up till the round is over, or the cycle, or the turn, or whatever. Okay, and so this guy has a 15 on a 60. Is his weapon attack, so he's going to parry at a 15. Alright, so if we go back to the differential roll table, right, which was on page 50 something, 51. Alright, we have a protagonist success, and we have an antagonist failure. So the protagonist wins one level of success. Okay, so we got one level of success. What that means is, at this point, the difference grants the combatant with the superior roll one or more special effects. Okay, so what happens at this point, like we're saying this guy missed, right? But I decided to go ahead and use my action to parry anyway in hopes that I would get a special effect, right? So we'll talk about that here in a minute. But this is an advantage, right? You want to have this special effect available for you when you're fighting, because one blow can make a difference, right? So that's a 15, and that is a 39. And I'll leave it right there. Alright, I know you can't see them because there's probably too much light over there in that area, but we'll just say that that's what they were, because that's what they were from the beginning. Alright, so unable or unwilling to parry. Okay, we're at the next page. In a situation where a defender is unable to parry due to having no action points, which kind of sucks, or confident in his ability to weather the blow, right? So you may go, this guy's attacking me with a dagger, and I'm at full hit points, and I know that I have 3 armor points, so this guy's not really going to be able to hurt me too much. I will go ahead and suck up the damage, no matter what it is, because it might be better for me to hold my action points for a little bit later, because I might need it to do something. Okay, so this is treated as having automatically rolled a failure. Okay, so I automatically failed. This is not a fumble, alright? There's a difference between fumble and failure, right? So you just fail. And that's it. Okay? This has the consequences of granting a successful attacker one or more special effects. Okay, failed rolls and fumbles. If both combatants fail their rolls or a defender decides not to take advantage of a missed attack, then the attack parry sequence ends and combat continues on to the participant with the next highest initiative. Fumbling a combat style roll has no additional effect other than the chance it provides his opponent to inflict multiple and more dire special effects against him. If a combatant fails when his opponent fumbles, then he misses the opportunity to take advantage of his foe's clumsiness. You gotta at least succeed if the other guy fumbles. Okay. In the rare circumstance that both opponents fumble, games masters are encouraged to describe some hilarious or amazingly improbable event occurring which temporarily takes both out of the fight. Have fun with that. Okay. So, fighting is far more than simply injuring or killing an opponent. Combative arts teach many methods of defeating a foe, perhaps rendering them helpless or forcing them into a situation where they must capitulate without necessarily needing to actually cause them harm. Special effects represent these techniques and control how they occur in play. So we moved on to special effects. Right, this little blurb right here is retroactive parrying with a skill over 100%. Alright, so we're going to leave that alone because that's something I don't want to get into right now because skills over 100% can be problematic for most people. And this is mainly just to help you understand what combat is about and go over it in a simple way so you understand it and can take advantage of what rules you want and what rules you don't want. But this one here is like for advanced play, and if you're not there yet, by the time you get there, this will make sense, okay? But if you haven't gotten there yet and you don't know what this is about, don't worry. It's not a game changer until you get that far, right? It'll be fine if you don't know what that is right now, because you're gonna have to wait till your skills get up past 100% for this to even make sense, okay? And you'll see why. But until that time, I wouldn't worry about it too much because it's irrelevant until it's relevant. You know what I'm saying? So just don't worry about that right now. And if we need to, we can do that later and talk about that some more. But right now, we're just going to continue. All right. So remember, opponents engage in a differential role of their respective fighting skills, right? Like combat or evade, for example. Any resulting difference in success levels indicates an opportunity for special effects to occur. This reflects one combatant's maneuvering his opponent into a disadvantageous situation, which can be exploited using a cunning trick or tactic. The number of special effects received depends on the difference between the levels of success as illustrated on the differential levels of success table. Alright, so remember I had a 15, which was just a success, is not a critical. The other guy just had a failure, so it was one level of success, okay? If any special effects are won during an exchange, they must be selected before damage and hit location, if any, are rolled. In cases where the recipient is badly wounded, in addition to receiving a special effect, endurance rolls are resolved after the application of the special effect. So if you're suffering from wound damage and you've got to make some rolls, you do it after the special effect is over, not before. Okay, so you still get your special effect in before the guy dies, basically, if he's going to die. So, like a blood loss or something like that. So you still get your chance to raise the level of suffering to a whole nother level if you so choose. So you get that advantage. Okay, so special effects cover a diverse range of situations and techniques. Some are designed specifically for attacks, while others are intended for defense. A few are adaptable for either. Certain special effects can also be limited to particular weapon types or specific dice rolls, requiring a critical or fumble result in their skill check, for instance. When two or more special effects are granted, the combatant may freely mix and match which ones are selected, provided he meets the prerequisites, for each one. Okay? Some effects can be stacked. For example, an attacker who rolls a critical success and wins 2 special effects could choose maximize damage twice, rather than choosing 2 separate offensive maneuvers. Okay, so that's kind of cool. Alright, so let's go ahead and check this out. Alright, here's all of the special effects description. I mean, they go all the way down, and there's a ton of them, right? You have accidental injury, arise, bash, bleed, blind opponents, so forth, all the way down this list, okay? And then these X's right here show you if these are offensive, defensive, okay? If they're stackable, it's on this side, okay? If they're a specific weapon type, or if you have to have a specific role, right? Defender criticals, attacker criticals, okay? And that's for bleed. No, for blind opponent is defender critical, and bypass armor is attacker criticals. Okay, so attacker criticals on bypass armor, you still have, that's only offensive. Blind opponent is only defensive. Okay, so you can see that it pays just to take a look at this first before you go into the descriptions and try to figure them out. Okay, because some of these can be a little confusing, like flurry. I had a little trouble with that in the beginning. I had a little trouble with impale, right? And let's see, choose location, right? Let's see, choose location is only offensive, right? Let's see, what was the other one that I had problems with? Oh yeah, the kill silently one. You have to be like a thief or whatever in your combat, one of your combat styles, right? You have to be an assassin, right? Basically, combat styles assassination right here on 89s are combat traits, right? You get assassination, you can use that. Otherwise, you can't use it. Right, so a dude with a garrote doesn't have assassination. You can't use it just because he has that weapon. Doesn't mean you can use it to kill silently. All right. Disarm opponents. These are all really elaborate, right? And I would say to spend some time reading through this. Because I think if I go through this, it's just going to bore you. It would bore me going through them. But I think when you have the time and you feel kind of motivated to go through these, just read a few, you know, and call it a day, you know, little by little, and as you go along and throughout your week, and maybe just you could tackle them all in a week and get them done and read them, and as long as you have sort of a familiar knowledge of them, like take weapon, trip opponent, weapon malfunction, withdraw, things like that, right? You'll know what to do, right? It's not going to be like you're clueless and have to look it up. You're looking it up because you're trying to remember exactly what it is, but you have some idea of what it does, right? You're not trying to figure it out in combat. You've already figured it out in your head, and you just need a reminder, right, during combat. So this kind of will bubble up to the surface in your memory, and you go, oh yeah, and I remember how that works, and this is that. The other thing is if you have questions, going to the Tapatalk for Mythras, for the design mechanism, right? If you go there to the Tapatalk forum, you can ask those questions and you'll get a quick reply. Or you can ask me in the comments below, and I'm going to pay more attention because somebody asked me if I would continue to do this, and so I'm going to continue to do this. So obviously somebody likes it. I also put out a new module using the Mythras Gateway, call Dawn of the Red Daggers, which I'll be reviewing, and it's available on drive-thru as a PDF. And yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and continue doing some more stuff and continue doing these videos. But this special effects, I think, deserves you to go ahead and walk through it and check it out one by one, and see how they apply to maybe your character, right, when you make one. And see, apply your combat traits to the special effects summary, see what weapons and things like that would go good with your character. Maybe take a couple of notes, like, hey, I think these 4 special effects might come up pretty cool, and maybe put a couple of stars next to the ones that need criticals that you might want to use, because they might benefit, because maybe you got the impaling weapon, right, that you want to use impale, right, or you got an entangling weapon, right, like a whip or something like that, right, and so you might want to write the things down that actually apply to that weapon, right, and kind of go over them, right. So like, for instance, let's say I'm going to use what weapon? Let's see. Let's say I'm going to use whip. It says entrapping, flexible, and offensive. Alright. It also says entangle and stun location. That's under combat effects right there. Right? So entangle is right there. And stun location is right there. Okay? And it says it's an offensive special effect. Entangle is both offensive and defensive. Okay? Does not require you to have a critical. So entangle, right, I would look it up and see it's on page 97. Allows a character wielding or an entangling weapon such as a whip or net to immobilize the location struck. An entangled arm cannot use whatever it's holding. A snared leg prevents the target from moving, whilst an enmeshed head, chest, or abdomen makes all skill rolls 1 grade harder. Yeah, 1 grade harder. On his following turn, the wielder may spend an action point to make an automatic trip opponent attempt. Okay, automatic trip opponent attempt. Okay, an entangled victim can attempt to free himself on this turn by either attempting an opposed roll using brawn to yank free, or win a special effect, and select damage weapon, disarm opponent, or slip free. And those are the options that they have to try to get out of it. Okay, so that's entangle. The other one is stun location. Right? Stun location, the attacker can use a bludgeoning weapon to temporarily stun the body part struck. If the blow overcomes armor points and injures the target, the defender must make an opposed roll of endurance versus the original attack roll. That's why we don't move those dice. The original attack roll on this one is 15. Right? So now he has to make an endurance roll versus the original attack roll. He has to succeed at his endurance roll if he wants to get out of the stun, and he has to beat a 15. Okay, so that is not going to be hard, but it could happen. All right, that he fails that roll. All right, by either going over his endurance or by rolling a 14, yeah, or less, unless he rolls a critical. Right? If he rolls a critical, then it's a critical success. All right, so there's stun location. So you see what I'm saying? It's going to be individualized for each character. There's so many here, right? And there's so many different things you can do with one weapon. Like the whip is versatile. I really like it. And it's unexpected a lot of times, and people don't like to use exotic weapons like that, or they don't know what to do when they see a character with an exotic weapon like that. And they're going, I don't know the rules for all this, but you should kind of know a little bit, right? Because going through these special effects, if you're going to be game master, you're going to have to deal with that, right? So I'm going to continue to close combat and situational modifiers, all right? So here's some of the situational modifiers, right? Um, Attacking a helpless target. That is automatic, okay? Attacking in a confined situation. That would be both opponents, right? Both the player characters and the enemies, their foes, right? Makes everything hard. Defending while on lower ground or against a mounted foe. Your difficulty grade is hard. Fighting while on unstable ground. That's hard. But, let's say it's muddy. Okay? Guess what? Combat style. Uh, excellent footwork. When fighting on slippery, wobbling surfaces, the user can ignore the skill cap placed on combat rolls by the acrobatic skill. Wow. Right? Okay? Fighting while crouching or from one knee. That's hard. Fighting in poor visibility, like thick fog or a snowstorm. That is hard. Uh, Mist or rain, right? That can also affect the visibility. Defending against an attack from behind. Whoa, that dude's attacking your back. Whack! Now your parry is formidable. Ouch. Fighting while prone. Formidable. Fighting in partial darkness. Dim illumination. Formidable. Fighting in pitch black. Herculean. Blinded or loss of primary perceptive sense. Herculean. Yep, that darkness spell is going to make everybody upset. Right? Pitch black. Cannot see. Everybody has to use Herculean for skill rolls. Oh no. Yeah, it gets pretty tough. Okay, so, yeah, don't lose your torches in the dungeon. An important concept of close combat is that of engagement. A character is considered engaged if he's within melee weapon range of his opponent. If you're using the weapon size category and weapon reach categories, right, this might come into play, okay? Just because they're not adjacent doesn't mean they're not engaged, especially if this guy's got a spear, right? Okay. This does not necessarily require that both combatants can reach each other, only that one of them can be potentially struck by the other. Once a character has engaged with an opponent, he can no longer freely depart the fight, okay? Charging is a special exception. It requires some form of deliberate act to break contact with the foe, like withdraw, right? Okay? Who might not wish to allow him to depart. This is normally performed via combat action such as change range or outmaneuver, but sometimes an unexpected chance to disengage occurs by use of a special effect. Fleeing from a battle requires that engagement is broken first. Certain circumstances will allow a character to engage with multiple foes simultaneously, provided the enemy are in close proximity with each other. This can occur in many ways, for instance, closing with a line of soldiers, blocking a bridge, or jumping down into the middle of a tightly packed rabble. In such situations, not only does the character have the option of which foe he strikes, but the reverse is also true. Withdrawing from engagement in this circumstance depends on the distribution of foes. Obviously, retreating from the middle of a pack will be near impossible, while withdrawing from an organized formation might be automatic, provided the enemy doesn't wish to break ranks. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. Close combat mechanics. Charging. Charging is the act of moving quickly to increase force and impact of the attack. There's two main types of charging, depending on whether the attacker wishes to stop in engagement range with the target or continue sweeping past, through, or over the target. Okay, so you have charging into contact, bam, right? We kind of like a running back, right? You know, or like a rugby forward, right? Um, you know, you're coming into close contact during the ruck, right? Boom, right? You're just sitting there. You're not trying to charge through contact, right? That would be like a runner trying to break a rugby line, right? Uh, Charging into contact is where you want to hit the opponent and hopefully blow them back, knock them back, or have them, you know, have them get hit pretty hard by you, but you're going to stay in close contact. You're not losing them, in other words. Okay. Um, so a charge requires at least one full combat round of movement at running or sprinting speed prior to contact. Okay. One full round. Okay. One full combat round of movement. A charge imposes a penalty to the attack roll, increasing it by one difficulty grade. So if you have a standard difficulty, it just goes to hard. No problem. Okay. A charge increases a bipedal attacker's damage modifier by one step. Alright. So if you're 1d4, you go to 1d6. If you're 1d2, you go to, I believe it's 1d4. It might be 1d3. Alright, let me check that out. Let's just go look at the damage modifiers now. What does it say? Do we know? Do we know? I know I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you. Okay, damage modifier, 1d2, 1d4, 1d6, 1d8, 1d10, 1d12, 2d6. Yeah, see? There you go. Alright, so you go up one step. Or the damage modifier of four-legged creatures by two steps, such as a war horse, right? Or if you play Gamma World, shh, didn't say that. Maybe a podog. Okay. Alright, in addition, the size of the attacking weapon is improved by one step. Oh, ho, ho, ho. So you're saying my lance goes up one step? Oh, yes, it does. Let's see. How big is a lance? Oh man, 200 weapons. Let's see. Oh, this is going to be a one-handed weapon, right? Yeah, a lance. And it is huge already. It is huge. And it says the size of the attacking weapon is improved by one step. So it goes from huge to what? Gigantic? Is that what it is? Yeah, it goes to from huge to enormous. Have you seen my enormous lance? Yes. So your enormous lance is the attacking weapon. Defending weapons, only a huge weapon can deflect half the damage, and only another enormous weapon can deflect all the damage. So large, medium, and small weapons have no chance of deflecting any of the damage from a lance. Oh my lord. So the recipient of a charge has three options. You can attempt to parry. Okay, we know that that's probably not a good choice if you have just a long sword and a shield. Alright, evade. That would probably be the thing to do, okay? Or simultaneously counterattack the charging attacker. I want to counterattack the guy. He's a fully armored knight on a warhorse attacking you at full charge with a lance. Are going to counterattack. Okay. Parrying a charge attack holds some significant risks. Depending on the size and strength of the attacker, the primary danger is suffering knockback which we'll talk about later, which may leave a victim prone even if they suffer no other damage from the impact. Okay. Use of the brace combat action. Remember brace. Okay, that's a good combat action to use at this point. In advance of the charge attack can help mitigate the effects of knockback. The secondary threat comes from the bonus to the charger's weapon size, which may permit a blow to penetrate or overcome the defender's parrying weapon. Evading a charge attack is more of a gamble, but in some circumstances may be the only option. The defender must make an opposed roll of his evade skill versus a charging opponent's combat skill. If the defender wins, he throws himself completely clear of the charge. Otherwise, he is hit. Bam! Any difference in the level of success results in special effects as normal. Counterattacking sacrifices the defender's opportunity to actively defend against a charge in exchange for a chance to injure the attacker. In such cases, both sides are treated as having failed to parry, although they can still benefit from passive blocking. The wielder of the weapon with the longest reach strikes first, potentially hindering his opponent from launching the subsequent blow. The wielder of the weapon with the longest reach strikes first. If using long-shafted impaling weapons which can be set against a charge, the defender may substitute his own damage modifier for that of the charging opponent, or its mount, if the attacker is riding. If you can set it against a charge, you can use that attacker's damage modifier, which already has gone up by one step, against him. Okay? That's kind of cool. Gives you an option. Charging into combat. Okay? Into contact. Some charges are intended as a method to crash into an opponent, then remain in place to take advantage of any chaos caused. An example of this would be a barbarian warrior armed with a great axe throwing himself at a shield wall, hoping that the impetus of his charge will help him smash through the defender's shield or knock him over. Once the charge strikes home, the attacker is considered engaged with his opponent. From that moment on, combat proceeds as normal. What's normal about combat? Nothing, but still. You get it. All benefits gained from the charge are lost after the first attack. Charging through contact. Okay, here we go. The second type of charge is one which uses the momentum to carry the attacker through and clear of the engagement. It is normally limited to mounted combatants or creatures of significant size, unlikely to be hindered by an impact with smaller foes, like a giant boar. For instance, an engaged aura could quite easily charge through a group of warriors, tossing or trampling over a victim as it passes before continuing on out of close combat range. The Aurak is like a ox. Okay. The speed of such charges prevents the attacker and defender from exchanging more than a single action with each other, namely the charge attack and the defender's reaction to it. Since the charge attack occurs on the attacker's turn, they will have already been carried clear by the time the defender's turn arrives. Note that charges are not limited to just running, but can be performed by flying or swimming creatures in the relevant environment. Right. Sharks can charge attack and charge through contact. They can also, like a hammerhead, charge into contact. I've got to sneeze. Okay. Sorry. Hopefully I can cut that out. I had to sneeze. Cover. Cover is used by opponents to obscure attacks, whether from range or close combat. This occurs by either physically blocking a blow due to the toughness of the interposing material, or by obscuring where precisely the foe is. For example, a guard standing behind a crenellated wall. You know what a crenellated wall is? Right? It's like a block that goes up and down and up and down. Right? And, they can see through that little open space, and they they can move to the space behind the big stone, right, wall. So standing behind a crenulated wall may have his lower body shielded, whereas a thief hiding somewhere behind a curtain may be hidden from direct attack. The precise value of cover depends on the thickness of its protection and the extent of its cover. In the case of partial cover, any attack against a target which lands on an obscured hit location will be blocked by the extent of the cover's inherent protection. Okay, so if it's a carpet, it might have an armor of 1. Okay. Thus, in the case of the guard covered by the crenulated wall, any attack which would normally hit the abdomen or legs would be stopped by this stone fortification. Does that make sense? Because that's under full cover. The effects of cover can be partially negated either by use of the choose location special effect, aim at visible parts of the target, or striking through the cover if the weapon is capable of penetrating, like the carpet. When using ranged weapons, however, choose location normally requires a critical success, which makes taking cover against missiles extremely worthwhile. In situations where cover is total, but the attacker knows his attack will penetrate, he may strike blindly at the hidden target, right, like the guy behind the carpet. In such cases, the attack roll is 1 grade harder, and choose location may not be taken if a special effect is 1. This assumes the cover is not so extensive as to permit the target to move freely behind it. Thus, someone lurking behind a small bush could still be attacked, even though the attacker might not be able to see his quarry, but if he was behind a lengthy hedge, his position could not be accurately predicted. Okay? That all makes sense, I believe. Okay? No, because an arrow will go through a bush. Pretty easy. If you know the guy ducked behind there, you might have a chance of hitting him just by shooting through the bush. Evading. Protecting oneself from attacks such as volleys of ranged weapons, headlong charging beasts, and even destructive magical spells can be exceptionally difficult, especially if the consequences will overwhelm or ignore a shield. In these situations, often the best thing for a character to do is fling himself to the side or dive behind cover to escape. This is known as evading. Evasion attempts require an opposed roll of the attacker's pertinent skill versus the evade skill of the defender. This is why you don't pick up the dice after you roll them, right? Because it could be against the attacker's attack roll. Alright, this could be anything from the dive roll of a charioteer to the spell casting roll of a musician. If the attacker wins, then they inflict damage as per normal. If the defender wins, damage is completely avoided. Whatever the result, the evasive combat leaves the evasive gambit leaves the defender prone, usually requiring him to regain his footing on this following turn. Right, so you have to choose like rise or something like that to get up. Okay. You can also get special effects out of it. Alright, it can be also made more difficult or rendered impossible depending on the circumstances. The character is helpless or entangled, well, you can't evade if you're entangled. There's nowhere to evade to, like if you're balancing on a ledge while scaling a cliff. There's no place to evade to there. A mounted character may only evade by flinging themselves clear of the saddle, right? Because you're being rushed headlong by your mount. You don't really have that much control. Evading is not normally performed in close combat due to its inherent disadvantages. However, a character facing a hand-to-hand attack against which he has no applicable defense due to the lack of a weapon, or an inferior size one which won't block the damage, may have no other choice. In such cases, evading provides only a temporary respite from a determined opponent who decides to follow up, preventing the prone character from regaining their feet. Alright, nothing prevents a prone character from attempting to evade subsequent attacks with the proviso that they suffer a fighting while prone situational penalty, which we saw back over here. Fighting while prone, situational modifiers. Fighting while prone. Formidable. Okay. As they continue to roll aside or scrabble backwards away from their attacker. Okay. That's kind of hard. Kind of harsh, but it happens. Flying combat. Fighting against flying creatures in full-scale aerial battles provide a rather interesting dynamic to close combat, since most airborne creatures require constant movement to remain aloft. Attacking ground-based targets. It can be difficult for ground-based characters to defeat airborne foes. Remember the charge through contact thing? Mm-hmm. Of course, in some encounters, the flying creature will hover or land on the combatants, allowing combat to proceed normally. In others, the flying creatures may fly back and forth, sweeping down to make attacks before continuing back out of range. In the latter situation, it is recommended that each strafing run is treated as charging through contact. See charging, page 102. This can make airborne creatures deadly opponents unless ground-based defenders have some sort of ranged weaponry or cover. Aerial combat aloft. Combat between aerial creatures or creatures mounted on flying beasts should be handled slightly differently. Unlike ground-based fighting, it often takes a significant period of time to jockey into a position where one airborne opponent can assault the other. Each brief engagement only allows one of them to attack before the flying creatures travel apart, requiring them to maneuver again to see which gets the upper hand in the next pass. Thus, at the start of each round, combatants must make an opposed roll of their fly skills or ride if allowed. The winner is the one who can attack that round. If facing multiple opponents, use a group opposed roll, and all those who beat the lone participant may attack that round. Attacks are resolved in a similar manner to charges. They're resolved in a similar manner to charges, the recipient allowed to parry, evade, or counterattack. In the case of particularly large creatures or those traveling at high speed, the game master may wish to increase the maneuvering time between passes, for example, perhaps 1d3 rounds for a griffin or 1d6 rounds for a dragon. In these cases, it is wise to limit mounted archers or spellcasters to acting on each pass, since most of the intervening time the rider will be thrown about in aerial acrobatics, or the enemy target will be out of range. 'Tis true. Aerial tactics. Airborne combat can be spiced up by introducing terrain and environmental factors. Clouds can be used for ambushes or places to escape battle. Tall buildings and narrow canyons can offer a dramatic setting in which to set chases, with the participants playing a deadly game of chicken if they fail their flying or riding rolls. An aerial battle could even involve support fire from the ground, forcing combatants to hoard their action points to evade deadly ballista bolts whilst trying to beat their flying opponents. Sounds like they're trying to kill you. Knockback. I hate this one. Okay, so an attack which imparts more damage than the size of the recipient will by default result in him being knocked back. So let's say your size is 12. If somebody hits you with more damage than, let's say, if they hit you with 13 points of damage, it can result in you being knocked back. The damage in this circumstance is before any reduction due to parrying or armor. On receiving such a blow, the recipient must pass an easy acrobatics or standard athletics roll to avoid falling prone. They are also thrust backwards 1 meter for each 5 points of damage or fraction thereof. So in this case, a size 12 person would be 3 of those 5-point sections. So that'd be 3 meters, right? Because you got 5, 10, and then the remainder of the 2, right, in excess of their, right? So that's 3. Proactively using the brace combat action can reduce or even negate the effects of knockback. Knockback differs from the bash special effect, and the knockback is the automatic and accidental side effect of tremendously powerful blows, whilst the bash is a deliberate technique which relies on timing and leverage, right? Okay. Leaping attacks. How much farther do we have to go? Okay. There are some animals, monsters, even people who leap upon their victims in order to knock them prone. Leaping attacks can be launched from a variety of situations. Most are triggered as part of an ambush or at the conclusion of a charge. A few creatures have the ability to leap atop an opponent without the need for a run-up or superior height. A leaping attack is resolved with an opposed roll of the leaper's athletic skill. versus the defender's brawn or evade skill. If the leaper wins, the defender is automatically knocked prone, with the attacker astride them. If the attack fails, the defender has weathered or sidestepped the impact. If the winner of the opposed roll achieves one or more levels of success over his opponent, they may select suitable special effects as per normal combat. No damage is inflicted, okay? You knock this person down with your leaping attack from a stone or a ledge above them, but no damage is inflicted as part of the leap. However, subsequently prone victim cannot recover his footing until either his attacker leaves him or he eventually wins special effect permitting him to arise. If the target is a quadruped, then it may substitute athletics for evade. It makes the attacker's initial athletics roll one difficulty grade harder. In addition, leaping attacks only work against opponents of up to twice the attacker's size. The target can make themselves more difficult to knock down by a proactive use of the brace combat action. Brace combat action, right? Do you guys remember what that is? Brace. Brace. The character braces himself by taking a firm stance, leaning into the direction of a forthcoming attack for the purposes of resisting knockback or leaping attacks. The character's size is treated as 50% bigger. Against the bash, the special effect size is doubled. The benefits of bracing are lost once the character moves away from the place they have planted themselves. Okay. Mounted combat. Whew, this is cool. Mounted combat is pretty cool. I like it. Unless learned as part of specially mounted combat styles, see combat style benefits, page 88, the combat skills of a rider may not exceed their ride skill. The advantages of being mounted are considerable, however. So what they're talking about is that combat trait on page 89, mounted combat, right there. Style allows rider to ignore the skill cap placed upon combat rolls by the ride skill. Okay. The advantages of being mounted are considerable. Mounted warrior rolls 1d10 plus 10 for the hit location of bipedal creatures, provided the target is lower than the rider. A mounted warrior can withdraw freely from engagement on his turn, provided his mount moves faster. Basically, has a faster movement value than the opponent, and the mount itself is not engaged in attacking. A mounted warrior may, at the cost of an action point, substitute either his own combat style or ride skill instead of the mount's to defend it against attacks. A mounted warrior may combine his size with his mounts for the purpose of avoiding knockback, provided he passes an unopposed ride skill. The mounted warrior may, when charging with a braced weapon, substitute his own damage modifier for that of his mount. A weapon braced for a charging attack cannot be used to parry. If the weapon impales, it must be left in the body of the target, or else break or dismount the rider as the mount continues to pass. So imagine that you're on a large creature and it has a damage modifier of 1d10, right? But you're charging, okay? That 1d10 goes to 1d12, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. Yeah. And that lance that you were using, man, all those things can add up. Alright. That's why mounted combat's kind of it's kind of tricky, but it's also kind of fun. Okay, so I like to use mounted combat. It's kind of awesome. Multiple opponents. Facing multiple opponents in Mythras is often exceptionally dangerous. Always. Let's just say always. Okay. While a character suffers no specific penalties to his combat skill, he can soon become swamped by his opponents and rapidly run out of action points. I repeat, rapidly run out of action points with which to defend himself. Once all his actions have been expended, the character is treated as having failed his parry roll against any subsequent attacks, which, in addition to any damage inflicted, also leaves him vulnerable to special effects. You're attacked by two goblins. They both have 2 action points. You have 3. Okay? They attack you once each. That's 2 of your action points there if you're going to parry. And you get to attack. Are you going to save that last action point to parry again? Because They got another action coming? Or are you going to go ahead and attack? Because they can also parry still. Alright? So yeah. 2 opponents, you can quickly get overrun. 3 opponents, now you're asking for it. Okay. Alright, so best tactics to use against being outnumbered are constrain the avenue of attack so that fewer opponents can engage simultaneously, like through a door, right? Or a small space. Fight as a formation to place disordered opponents at a disadvantage. That's a good thing. Outmaneuver around multiple opponents so that they interfere with one another. Yeah, that outmaneuver skill, man. That outmaneuvering, which is next, right? This will come in handy, right? Withdraw and flee the combat as quickly as possible. That live to fight another day. Yeah, don't stick around and get killed. All right. Character facing multiple opponents can use movement to limit the number of which can attack him at any one moment at a time. Okay, this works by constantly shifting position, forcing some foes to start running around the flanks of their companions to reestablish reach or lines of attack, generally causing them to interfere with one another. Outmaneuvering requires the character has room to move about and is not pinned in a confining area. It also assumes the character is engaged with the entire group of foes rather than a specific individual. An example of outmaneuvering in action would be a group of guards trying to arrest a drunken barbarian in a tavern. The warrior could maneuver around the tables, chairs, and roof supports to block the majority of his foes while he whittles them down one by one. Outmaneuvering requires that the character engages his opponents in a group opposed roll of evade skills. Every participant, both the maneuvering character and those foes who wish to corner him, must spend an action point. Then they each roll once, and those who fail to beat the maneuvering character's roll cannot attack him for the remainder of the combat round, being blocked by their allies or terrain features. If the maneuvering character beats all of his opponents, he has a choice of safely engaging a single foe for the rest of the round or withdrawing from the fight completely. You see, outmaneuver. That is an option to remember if you get outnumbered. Okay? Passive blocking. Oh, so important. Passive blocking. Right. Passive blocking is a free action. Ward location. The character guards a particular hit location from being hit by dedicating one of his weapons to static or shield. Statically cover the area. Any blow which lands in that location has its damage automatically downgraded as per normal for a parrying weapon of its size. The ward continues until the dedicated weapon is used to attack or actively parry. Establishing a ward or changing the hit location covered must be performed prior to an opponent rolling to attack the character. Due to their design, shields can cover multiple areas. For further explanation, see Passive Blocking, page 105. Passive blocking is the placement of weapons and shields in such a manner such that they effectively act as cover. Characters armed with a weapon may hold it in such a way that it covers a chosen location or locations when using a shield, but at the cost of being unable to actively parry with it. Any attack which hits those locations automatically receives the benefit of the weapon or shield, reducing damage as normal. The technique is commonly used when a warrior wishes to guard a weak spot or wounded location. It may seem paradoxical to sacrifice the ability to parry, potentially opening up a passively blocking character to an unopposed attack. However, there are many situations where it is a valid tactic, right? For example, when used by inexperienced troops or those lacking full sets of armor. In addition, there is nothing which prevents two weapons or weapon and shield combatant from using his other weapon to actively parry. Since passive blocking works in the same way as cover, the choose location special effect cannot be used to bypass the block in close combat, though opponents can still use the effect to strike other unblocked areas. Assuming a shield, passive blocking against missiles becomes even better, since for ranged weapons, choose location is a critical only. Crouching down behind a shield allows a character to double the number of locations covered whilst passive blocking. Bam! Remember that. Passive blocking could save your butt. Pulled blows. Occasionally, the character may wish to avoid maiming or killing an opponent. This is achieved by pulling a blow, limiting the force placed behind it, or striking with less lethal part of the weapon. Pull blow halves the damage inflicted on a successful hit. However, the intent to pull a blow must be stated before the attack is made, since it is near impossible to withhold a fully committed strike once it's been launched. Okay? You gotta do it before. You gotta state your intent. Okay? Surprise. Oof. The effects of surprise occurs when an unexpected attack is launched against opponents unaware of the attacker's presence or intention. An ambush would be an example, while treachery turning on an unsuspecting ally during amiable conversations illustrates the latter. Here's the effects. You get a -10 on initiative. Ugh. Until their initiative arrives, they are considered flat-footed, cannot defend themselves. You cannot defend yourself. First attack on the target, if successful, gains a bonus special effect. A bonus special effect. For the remainder of the round, they may not perform any offensive action. Not till the next round, baby. Stuck. Alright? Try to avoid it. Alright? Try to avoid it. Alright? A surprise can be so devastating, targets of such an attack should be permitted a chance to detect the impending conflict. For instance, an ambush might allow an opposed roll of perception versus stealth, or insight versus deceit for a betrayal. Or how about tactics, strategy and tactics, right? I know we're going to be going down into this gully, right? This would be a perfect chance for us to get attacked or ambushed, right? So successful strategy, right, would be good. That'd be good, right? I would think so. Alright, so difficulty modifier should be applied in situations where the target is hindered, such as being inebriated or dozing lightly. Conversely, a bonus should be applied if the target is suspicious or forewarned. If the target wins the opposed roll, then the effects of surprise are negated. Yeah, that surprise will get you. It's a bad one, right? But you also use it to your advantage if you surprise your opponents, right? You always want to get the advantage of surprise. Sweep attacks. When weapons or creatures of unusual size attack a closely clumped group of opponents, the scything tail of a huge dragon, for example, striking several foes simultaneously, a sweep attack is made by applying a single attack roll of the weapon or creature to all targets in its path. Each defender must resolve the effects of the attack separately. Any special effects imposed on the attack or retreat as having occurred concurrently. Sweep attacks can also be used for other area effect assaults, such as the overhead smash of a giant's tree trunk, right? The club, or the unstoppable charge of a giant triceratops. The games master decides how many foes are caught in the attack based upon the length or trajectory of the weapon and his visualization of the conflict. Okay, unarmed combat. Here we go. Unarmed combat is the default combat style available to any person or creature which covers the skill of fighting using only the limbs and natural armament of their own body. Some beasts have a variety of natural weapons, each with a different reach and size, which can make larger creatures particularly dangerous, able to stand off at longer range and still launch blows capable of smashing through the stoutest shields. The unarmed combatant techniques used by animals and monsters are examined in more detail in the creatures chapter, right? Although unarmed combat seems superfluous for warriors who utilize weapons, it still provides a number of advantages. But think about this. If you are a mystic and you use mysticism, right, you could possibly make your hands weapons. You could stick to the wall. You could use giant leaps. You can make your skin hard like iron as armor. You can use make your hands claws, or they can be flames of fire. You can do all kinds of stuff with unarmed attacks using magic, things like that. So unarmed combat can be used interchangeably with any other weapon style, provided the target is within reach of the attacker's natural weapons. Remember, you have to use the unarmed um, skill. All right, so if that skill level is very low, then you're stuck with that. All right, so remember that unarmed skill is going to be important if you ever lose your weapons. Unarmed combatants can be used offensively for either striking or grappling an opponent. Right, grappling, that's a good one. Right, you want to grip somebody. It's important for the user to declare which he intends in advance, since the resolution of each is handled slightly differently. Unarmed combatants can be used defensively to parry a weapon attack. Damage is reduced as per normal, according to the comparative sizes of the natural and wielded weapons. Even if no damage was stopped, the parry attempt might still prevent the defender from suffering one or more special effects. Note that if an unarmed combatant can step within the reach of an armed opponent, he will reduce the effective size of his opponent's weapon, making it quite possible to parry blows without suffering injury. Parrying weapons whilst unarmed, right? As previously described, a parry is actually a combination of parrying, blocking, and footwork to deflect the force of a blow. It is not simply interposing an object into the path of an attack to stop it dead. For example, using a forearm to block the sweep of a sword, since such an action would likely result in a mangled arm. Instead, most unarmed and armed combatants now use more subtle techniques to gain maximum deflection for the minimum risk. Remember, karate means knife hand, right? Examples include, but are not limited to, pressing against the hand or hilt of a weapon to change its line of attack, stepping very close to cut down angular movement or momentum of swing weapons, deflecting thrusts by knocking aside the point or haft, or even grabbing a weapon on the haft or blade against near its grip, right? Such methods rely on several points, however. Firstly, that the parrying creature is intelligent enough to understand and use said techniques, and secondly, that they are within unarmed range. The latter point is probably the most crucial and demonstrates the danger of facing an armed opponent with a longer reach. Striking. Using unarmed combat to throw simple damage-inflicting strikes is resolved in the same way as normal weapon attacks. Some special effects are specifically reserved for unarmed combat, namely flurry, grip, and take weapon. Calculating the damage size and reach of natural weapons is defined on page 222 of the Creatures chapter. Human unarmed attacks, for instance, have a size of small, a reach of touch, and inflict 1d3 damage. Some creatures' natural weapons and unarmed combat styles may add other effects or impart inherent special effects on a successful strike. For example, the gripping jaws of a crocodile or the poison stinger of a giant scorpion. Grappling attacks are resolved using an opposed roll of the attacker's unarmed skill versus the combat skill used by the defender. If the attacker wins, then they establish the grapple, but if the defender wins, the grapple fails. As with evade, if one of the combatants achieves one or more levels of success over his opponent, they may select an equal number of special effects. The effects of grappling depend on the location struck. The grappled limb is rendered inoperable, whilst grappling the head or torso imposes a difficulty penalty of hard against any skill the opponent attempts. In addition, on his following turns, the grappler may take unarmed attacks to inflict damage equal to his damage modifier on the body part by crushing, twisting, or strangulating. The defender may oppose with his own unarmed or bronze skill in order to reduce or block the damage. A grapple continues until the victim manages to break free. Escape attempts are performed on the victim's turn using the struggle combat action. This requires an opposed roll of either brawn or unarmed, whichever of the two skills the grappler prefers. If the grappled victim wins, they manage to break free. Note that some attackers using brawn may be so strong that no amount of brute force or cunning technique can overcome their grip. Grappling requires that the limb or appendage is empty and is capable of hooking, sticking, or gripping. Unusual combat conditions. There are certain circumstances and environments which may prevent a character from fighting his full ability. Climbing. A climbing character has all of his combat skills capped by the value of his athletic skills. Bipedal characters are limited to fighting with a single limb, requiring the other three to remain clinging to the surface. Swimming. Swimming character has all of his combat skills capped by the value of his swim skill. Since water imposes significant drag, only thrusting weapons are effective while submerged, and even those are reduced to half damage. Other weapons are slowed to the point of impotence. Unarmed combat attacks, which involve biting, strangulation, or ramming, are ineffective. Weapon reach. Opening and closing range. Okay, we talked about this, right? Fighting at the longer reach, fighting at the shorter reach, opening range, and withdrawing. Alright, which brings us to range combat. So next time, we will cover range combat. Yep. The hit locations, the wound levels, heroic last action, and one of my favorite things to use, rabble and underlings. Very cool stuff. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you get an idea, more of an idea of what combat's like. And again, like I said, I will be posting more videos. And like I said, I had some personal problems earlier that kind of permitted me from that kept me from doing what I wanted to do as far as videos go. So hopefully this new phase that we're in with the COVID environment will allow me this time to make more videos so I can share more Mythras with you guys, which I totally enjoy. Okay, so you guys have a great time gaming, and bless